Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 274. We're recording this episode live on February 23rd, 2023. I'm your host, Nick Rome. I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hello, hello, and great to be back.
It is great to be back. It's wonderful. I never left. I was ready to go last week behind the scenes. we got a
Yeah.
great we got a great show for y'all tonight. We're going to be talking about ageism and how it's being viewed as the last acceptable prejudice. We'll also answer some questions from the community about how to deal with imposter syndrome, what we'd change if we started our careers over, and what to address in your UX researcher portfolio. But first, we got some programming notes, and this was first thing I'm going to talk about is if you're listening to this now or before Friday at noon, there is an HFES town hall happening tomorrow, Friday at noon. Tomorrow when we're recording, Friday, February 24th at noon. Come join me as I sit down with HFES staff and other contributors to HFES to talk about the first town hall of the year. There's a lot of different topics from the annual meeting all the way to sort of a special task force established. So that's a little sneak peek for you all. Please tune in. It's it'll be some good fun to check in with HFES since we haven't done it since right before HFES last year, I think. And hey, by the way, speaking of human factors related things, we are less than 1 week until the public launch of Human Factors a Minute. That's out March 1st. You can get everything an episode or everything in a day early if you go and subscribe to that feed. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. Of course, you can always get access to the full show, the full library, if you support the show on Patreon. We don't get paid to do this, so we really appreciate any support that you can give us. There's that right there. Barry, I do have to ask you though, what is the latest over at 1202?
So in 1202, we have a new episode up, and that we're talking about workplace assessments, but not just any standard workplace assessments. We're talking about them for the audio and visually impaired. And Dan Williams spent a fair bit of time chatting to me about how he and his team do workplace assessments for audio and visually impaired people, and the value that we as individuals and the businesses, if you invest that time into your staff, they can actually provide you that, you look at it as an investment because they can provide much better quality for your business if they've got the right tools and the capability to do the job. So that's live now. Feel free to go and have a listen. And then coming up is a discussion with Martin Bromley, who is somebody who is inspiring a whole bunch of change around human factors in the health service.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. I'm glad you touched on buying tools for the employees to make them feel heard and empowered. I love that. But now it's time to get to the news, so let's go ahead and get into it. That's right. This is the part of the show all about human factors news. Barry, the story this week is a fun one. Let's talk about it.
So this week we're talking about ageism being the last acceptable prejudice. According to an article on UX Collective by author, speaker, and digital media expert Chris Converse, the subtle yet pervasive practice of ageism has spread to the UX UI design process in the digital and UX field as a whole. Converse explains how ageism has infiltrated advertising and is beginning to manifest itself in the form of memory-improving products aimed at older adults, which perpetuate negative stereotypes about aging. The article also emphasizes the fact that older adults are frequently excluded from digital technology research and design, despite the fact that their inclusion is critical if technology is to fulfill its promise of improving well-being. The author emphasizes the importance of recognizing older adults as a valuable resource and how ageism harms the industry. As a result, he's encouraging businesses to include age in their diversity statements and to capitalize on the accumulated knowledge and competence of older workers. Converse also reminds younger generations that dismissing somebody because of their age is the last acceptable prejudice, and that such discrimination can have negative consequences for everyone. So, Nick, what are your thoughts? Sorry, do I need to turn this up for you to be able to hear it? What are your thoughts on the on this article?
You ready? You ready for a hot, spicy take?
Go on then.
Okay, this one might be a little unpopular. It sounds like someone's throwing a tantrum, and I mean, they're using this forum to complain. Now, there's 2 points of thought that I have about this, and I wanna make sure that I'm clear about this, because that sounds like I'm reacting to the fact that he's saying that ageism is the last acceptable prejudice. It's not that. It's just that it sounds like this is his forum to complain. So, let's talk about this. There's 2 ways to think about this. This is including older folks in usability testing for user studies, and there's also including older folks in the design process and research roles, that type of thing. In the first example, I think it might be an issue in the design process, but there are valid reasons why older adults aren't always included in these things. Chief among them, technology is constantly evolving, and what may work for an older generation now may not work in the future because of digital nativity, right? You have these digital natives who have grown up, they understand uh, how software works, and so you don't need to do. They won't need to go through as many sort of accessibility hurdles as elder generations now. Okay, there's also the older adults. They won't always be a target audience for some of these products. So why waste the time and resources and trying to cater to them specifically for those products, not for products designed specifically for them? And I don't think this is necessarily discrimination. I think this is just common sense. It's a 1202 reference there. But then there's a second sort of reaction that I have of getting older folks involved in the design process and research roles, that type of thing. And I think it is disappointing to see some negative stereotypes perpetuated about older folks. And if you are subscribed to our feed, you saw that last week I posted a recast of an episode that we did talking about which cognitive abilities actually improve as we age. I think there's the stereotype that as people age and get older, that their cognitive abilities fail, and that's not necessarily true. In fact, we talked about it in that last episode, so go listen to that. It's in our feed. But I think what the older generation can provide, they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of lessons learned that they can pass on, and it's a lot of do as I say, not as I do, because it's a learned habit, and we have to figure out some things on our own. But if we can circumvent that by talking to mentors who have already gone through that process before, then it's completely different. And I think he's spot on with the fact that companies should include that age in their diversity statements. I will personally be old someday, and I want to still be able to get hired. So that's my thoughts on it. Barry, what are you thinking about this article?
So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think from a design perspective, we do go a long way to be inclusive. So things like we try and make sure that we cater for color blindness, even though the amount of people that colorblind is a minority. That's what it is, but we cater for it as a matter of course. Variations in fingertips, like touchscreens, are prevalent now. So the way that we ensure the touchscreen areas or active areas cater for a broad range of finger sizes. The number of, say, 70, 80, 90-year-olds, which is the sort of the age I think of when we start talking about the older generation, which is not what my daughter said at the dinner table when she was saying about 40 and 50-year-olds. And I'm like, I'm 44, back off. But the 70, 80, 90-year-olds that we're talking about are currently, they're not really in a majority digitally tech savvy. They are a growing minority, and more people are becoming the silver surfers, as we call it. But fundamentally, that's not really where the audience is. But as you've just alluded to, digital immigrants, digital natives, as we're growing older, we are going to become this older generation, and so we are going to have this technology that maybe isn't being developed thoroughly in a way for people with failing eyesight, arthritic fingers, failing hearing, dementia, things like that. We need to perhaps think about, right, how does this technology evolve to do that properly? And we're just not there yet. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. But also, I think ageism is a two-way street, because in this article, we are naturally focusing on older people. But there is a cultural issue here as well, because when I was discussing this at the dinner table, as I like to do prior to the shows. My daughter highlighted that there's so many people from the older generation who look down on the younger generation, going, "Well, It was never like that in my day, whatever that is. You don't sit all the. I mean, so there was the point raised that everyone talks about people sitting there being on the phones all the time. But then historically, people, the people will be sat at the dinner table with their newspapers, still ignoring everybody at the dinner table, but the dads will be sat there with their newspaper. So it's the same thing. They're still disconnected. It's just in a different way. And so actually that it was never like that in my day can be seen as almost a bit bullying too, if that makes sense. And also culturally some notions about how we behave in public. So we sort of see that, historically the young would always give up their seats on public transport for older people. Whereas now I think there is a thing there. Well, I paid for my seat. Why should I move for a 40, 50-year-old who is perfectly fine? Even a 60-year-old, maybe when you get into 70, 80, or they're pregnant, or there's a real reason for them to sit down. But just that whole piece of, we should respect the older generation and do that just doesn't exist anymore, or in the same sort of way. So I
In
think there's a whole
Western cultures. In Western
in
cultures.
Western cultures, yes. And I think there is a whole lot of stuff there, that culturally and also technologically that is evolving and changing, and it's going to be interesting to see how we keep up with it. That was
Yeah.
longest reaction I think I've ever done.
I think those were the longest reactions that we've ever done, both of us. But there's a couple different ways in which we can go for discussing this article. I think just to reiterate, right, this article brings attention to ageism, right? It's
Mhm.
a form of discrimination for anyone who's unfamiliar with the concept, right? Form of discrimination often overlooked, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And we actually talked about culture and HCI couple, I guess it was like the 2 episodes ago, with when Heidi was on the show with us. And I think this is a good tag along to that topic because really, um, the author highlighting this last acceptable prejudice, which actually came from a comedian that I'm not too fond of, but is pervasive in the tech industry and really, if you think about the tech industry, it's largely dominated by younger generations right now. You see a lot of young people in UX and UX research and design, and I think this sort of culture of younger folks in these tech in this tech environment is perpetuating this prejudice, as he calls it, right? So I don't know exactly where you want to go with this, Barry, but
Well, I think following up on that comment you just made is a really good point, because the nature of technology means that it's always been the younger generations who keep pace with it. And then as them generations get older, the younger generations then keep pace with it. So is this is if we talk about it as a as a prejudice, but actually it could be argued that that is just evolution. That is just one of these things. It's a characteristic of you getting older. You get more comfortable in. So we are more the Facebook generation, I think, as my kids would call it now. And they think it's very quaint that we still go and use Facebook and post on Facebook, things like that. Whereas my parents will sort of, well, my mum doesn't touch any sort of social media at all. My dad will dip into it to see what we're up to, and so he will look on it and they'll look at the photos and things like that, and they use the technology differently. In 10 years time, the technology is going to move on again vastly, and just because we are digitally native or digitally immigrant into these sort of things, will we feel this discriminated against, because of that, just because the people who are developing it are younger, and so they're developing it for effectively themselves. And how we talk about trickle down when it comes to things like economics and stuff. Is there a trickle up effect here? And I don't know.
well, it's interesting because there's things that are designed for older generations, right? We had a whole episode about giving in-home assistance to elderly in New York, as sort of a companion as well as a assistant to take care of other things. but I'm sure that they included that demographic in their user research. And
Yes.
I'm positive that they had like SMEs that they talked to, subject matter experts, right? I think ultimately when we're looking at this, all right, there is ageism in some ways, but it's not necessarily a result of intentional discrimination. It's rather a reflection of the demographic of how the tech industry workforce is comprised, right? I think younger people often pursue these careers in tech, like I was mentioning, and because they're more prevalent, that's kind of where they're looking. So it's sort of unintentional in a lot of ways. I think you brought up the point of older adults maybe being less capable of adapting to new technologies. And, some would say this is due to cognitive decline or just, whatever, but it does make them less desirable because of that stereotype for certain tech jobs, right? There is a stereotype there, and that's why we're talking about ageism. It is important to recognize though that age doesn't necessarily equate to cognitive decline. In fact, we had a whole episode that I just posted in our feed. I'll call back to that episode, but I think there's just a lot of things that we'd have to it's nuanced, and
Mm.
it's I don't know. I think the author does make some valid points. And I want to address those, right? Like I had a spicy take at the top, but I do want to address, like, yes, this could be uh because let me just mention one more thing, and then I'll let you talk, Barry, because I've been going on here. But I will say that some of the most valuable advice that I've ever received have been from that generation,
Hmm.
especially as it relates to human factors, right? They were sharp still for their age. I mean, like, I'm even doing it now. I'm saying for their age. They were sharp, they were attentive to my goals, they were, you know, a good mentor. And so I appreciated that feedback and that advice, and I took it to heart, and now look where we're at, right? So, like, I don't know. I I just wanted to bring that up. Like, the author has some points. Barry, go ahead.
I think the author has some good points, almost backhanded good points, because there is. I think if we were to suggest, certainly from a human factors perspective, that the human body does not degrade over time in its capabilities, both physical and mental, then we are doing ourselves. We're either lying to our faces, lying to ourselves, or we're doing ourselves an injustice because it does. Now, the speed and rate that happens has massive variability. I know people well within their 90s who are sharper, more eloquent, and cleverer than me. I also know people who are quite young, or comparatively young, maybe not that much older than me, who are starting to show signs of cognitive impairment. But fundamentally, between between the time you're born and say 40, 50, let's say 40 years of age, roughly, um, the chances of you showing true cognitive decline is rare, to the point that we would rarely include that in any sort of target audience description, any sort of user group, or that type of thing. So where this article highlights that there are technologies around memory improving aids for older adults, and you can also include with that, I think, um, phones with bigger buttons on, with larger text on screens and things like that. The accessibility elements of your phone makes things bigger or reads them out, because if your eyesight is starting to degrade, I think. But there is a fine balance there between, I think, designing for an audience that you are aiming for. So designing products to be helpful, designing products to fulfill that, and then actually discriminating against people within the workplace, and things like that. I think there's things like I said, that we've both given examples of people we know who would be great in jobs regardless of their age, because they're still as sharp as anything, which is fine. But I think the not recognizing the way that we change over time is possibly doing everybody a disservice. So it's how do we balance that whole what is true ageism as a prejudice and ageism as a recognition of fact. Discuss.
Okay. Well, I mean,
And
yeah, no, you're right. You're right, right. And I think there's a couple solutions to this, at least off the top of my head, right? You could sort of incorporate more older generation into your studies. And that's kind of the easy low hanging fruit solution, right? Okay, well, there's this problem, they're not included, include them. I think, as I mentioned earlier, and as the author mentioned too, including age as sort of a protected element within those diversity inclusion statements. I think that is another possible, patch to this, especially for keeping those aging population in the workforce. And this, by the way, quick tangent here. There's the whole other issue of the workforce shrinking because we're not reproducing at the same rate that we were before. That has a whole bunch of other social issues, but one of them is that the workforce is not being replaced at the same rate. Therefore, older generations may need to stay in for longer to, whatever. So
and
there's that, but then also another solution could be potentially you have the sexual harassment training. Why don't you have like and discrimination training and include age in that training material, right? Those are some potential solutions to this problem. I do want to back up just really quick and talk about the article itself. I think this is somebody's subjective experience. They do present a compelling argument to address ageism in tech, but I really think, some more specific examples would be really helpful. I think some research to actually back this up and make it known that it's an issue would be helpful. So if anyone's looking for like a thesis or, you know, a dissertation idea, there you go. And I think the impact is highlighted, but they don't again provide solutions from their perspective. This is why I went with my spicy take at the top. It feels like, okay, are you just bitching, or are you trying to fix things? Because let's talk about this. And it may have just been an opening statement to say let's talk about this, a conversation, discuss. But at the same time, you could offer those solutions at the top to say I've done my homework. I don't know. It just to me it just seemed a little weak in that regard. Ah.
yeah, and I think that's why we've almost dissected it in the way that we have, is because there's two different takes you can have on it. One is is almost that moral and ethical viewpoint of ageism as a prejudice, and if you're choosing, are you choosing people for the right reasons? Um, but equally, to suggest that we stay, it's almost suggesting that the human body stays the same throughout its life with exactly the same capabilities, exactly the same functions, and things like that. And that's just not true on both, throughout the spectrum of age, not just looking at older people. Because equally, you would never suggest that a baby should be flying a fighter jet. That less than 5 years old might be outside of my design parameters at that point. Um, but equally, the is it just tech? Um, with this type of discussion debate, it goes quite broadly, doesn't it? It's everybody uses age and it's only in one way or another. So within, you can't join the military above a certain age because you're deemed to have been past your best at that point. Pilots can't fly beyond commercial pilots can't fly beyond a certain age because they're deemed to be past their best for that sort of thing. So the more that we look at that, I mean, we have had educational degrees are a certain length in time rather than really capability driven and competence driven. We trying to get people to be competence driven within their job rather than how many years you've got under your belt is still an evolving beast. So I think age is still going to be a problem or an issue, a debatable topic for quite a while and for a number of years to come.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're talking about different industries a little bit with military. I want to talk about this in terms of government too, because you have a an objectively older generation, at least here in the States,
Mhm.
dictating laws and policy. And this is, I think, part of the reason why younger generations are so fired up about this issue is because, look, like, their policymakers are showing that they clearly don't understand some of the implications and dangers of what tech can do wide scale to culture and society. Okay. We've talked about this many times on the show, right? AI right now is running rampant. And I mean that in the best possible way. It's fun to see everything that's happening, but
Yes.
also it's introducing a lot of really dangerous technologies out there that are abusive and harmful to individuals. And so, because we don't have any laws in place right now that dictate what we can and cannot do with technology, artificial intelligence, anything like that, there are there are people out there who are getting hurt because of this. And I think that's important to consider, right? When you have lawmakers that are of an advanced age that are making these decisions for us, does it make sense then? Is this retribution for like, okay, we need to include people of our own generation to, of the younger generations. I shouldn't say of my generation, of younger generations to research this because it's clear
Well,
on a national stage that they don't get it. Right?
and
Those are
it's
our role models,
and this
so to
is
speak.
definitely yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is where we the our governmental system almost breaks down, is that there are not enough, and I think we do it maybe slightly better here in the UK than what you got in the US, because I think in the US it is so driven, to get anywhere near them houses of power, you need to have some significant money behind you to get there. You're only going to get there after a period of time, building up a power base, etc., etc. No matter what level you're at, it's significant. So we need to be able to encourage people, young people, to have their voice heard and to be able to do that. And that will then bring in some of this, because you see some of the committees in the States where they've interviewed like Mark Zuckerberg and people like that, just on, and the level of questioning is almost embarrassing. It
Right.
is to the point of you're sitting there going, you've got no idea truly what you're talking about, and you are literally just point scoring. You're trying to score. You're trying to be clever, and you're not. It's not you're not clever enough to do it. You just don't. Yeah, you don't have an appreciation of the technology and how it's used.
Well, yeah,
Um,
and I really quick, I just want to comment on that. I think a lot of that is the progression of questions. Yes, they're
mhm,
trying to get a line of inquiry, but the progression of questions doesn't go more than a couple layers deep to get at what they're trying to investigate, right?
mhm.
And I think that really could go a long way if they treated those investigations like a usability study, or a user interview where you are lining up all those questions. I mean, I know they are, but in the sense of really establishing what is your goal, and I'm not saying they don't do this, but I think there is some things that government can learn from usability.
Well, there is, and this is one of the things I'd sort of highlight what we've got going in the UK at the moment. So we do have some members of parliament who are younger. So it always used to be like some members of parliament you get to maybe like your 50s and your 60s and things like that. Whereas now there are some significantly impressive members of parliament who are in younger than me, significantly younger than me, doing some good stuff. I mean, there's one in particular, Darren Jones, who's chair of a committee at the moment, one of the basically a business select committee, and he has been taking people to task on technology and technology uses, all the way from Amazon through to the mail service, etc., etc., but coming at it from a position of knowledge. And they do that so they're not political point stock, it's done in a cross party way, but they're actually doing what I think is almost a proper investigation. They're properly drilling down. They're properly holding people to account, and it's quite impressive to see when that starts happening. But we just don't see enough of it, I think. And the more people we get in government who are younger, then the better represented people are. So we've gone on a slight tangent, but I think I think it's a valid one.
Yeah, no, it is. It is because it all relates to tech, right? Especially if, like I said, these people who are leaders are not understanding it, then why would we include them?
Yep, absolutely.
Just and
Um,
that perpetuates that stereotype. Barry, do you have anything else that you'd like to talk about on the topic?
so I think I would summarize it in I think in it's almost two there's two halves to it. One is we need to be thinking selfishly, we need to be thinking about ourselves. So we're going to be wanting to use this tech when we're older. So what are the changes that we want to see happen to it as we get older, and to be able to allow us to engage with it in the way that we do today. So there is an element of that about how the digital immigrants, digital natives, as we evolve, how does this tech evolve with us? Because we're still going to want to use Facebook, even if the younger generations are not, or something equivalent. But equally, I think the difference here between that and actual ageism, age discrimination, we need to make sure that we are utilizing people and the knowledge and the experience that they've gained as much as we can. You alluded to it almost at the top of the show, where we in the Western culture treat older people differently to Middle Eastern and Eastern cultures, where in Eastern cultures the elderly people are much more revered because of the knowledge and experience that they've gained, and maybe we could do a lot by learning from them in that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that cultural belief, those cultural values perpetuate in the way that they conduct UX and human factors in Eastern cultures, right? So I don't know. It's a good question. I think ultimately more research, education about this specific topic of ageism, and really the importance of including those diverse perspectives in the tech industry is really needed here. I think this is an observation. They bring up some the author Chris Converse. He brings up some articles, some papers suggesting or supporting that negative impact of
Mhm.
ageism, but and a little bit about sort of including them in design and research of digital tech, but like beyond that some we need some more research. It needs to be more robust in terms of how we approach this problem. And like you said, Barry, digital natives are going to age and are it's going to flip the script entirely, right? I don't know. It's just an unknown at this point. So
Mhm.
let's make it known. All right. Well, thank you to our everyone for this for selecting our topic, especially our patrons, and thank you to our friends over at UX Collective and Chris Converse for our news story this week. If you want to follow along, we do post links to all the original articles on our weekly roundups and our blog. You can also join us in our Discord for more discussion on these stories and more hot takes. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to see what's going on in the human factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, huge thank you as always to all of our patrons. We especially want to thank our Human Factors Cast All Access patron Michelle Tripp. Patrons like you truly keep the lights on over here. I make the joke a million times, but that's what it looks like without y'all. If you do want to help support the show, we have a bunch of different options for you. A buck gets you in the door. Even a buck really helps us out. Seriously. Anyway, we I mentioned it. We have a Discord. We have the Discord server. You can jump in there, get involved with other human factors professionals from all over the world. There's people joining all the time, and they're asking some really great questions. We've had questions most recently about what was it? It was nuclear power plants in space. Like
Mm,
that was a pretty cool topic.
yeah.
Um, you can jump in there, discuss the news with us. If you have some hot, spicy takes about ageism in the tech industry, come join us over there and let us know what you feel like. I think the more that we open up these discussions amongst ourselves, the more our views on this topic or any topic really get more refined and more nuanced. It's always refreshing to talk with others from various perspectives, right? It's super cool to see just what kind of folks join in there, because like it's truly international, and got a lot of great perspectives on there. So we even have sometimes we talk about stories, or not stories, like questions that we get from Discord on the show. There's getting more context around those, and there's a lot of activity, at least on our lab chat. There's a lot of so you can't see that part, but we're always there. We're always there watching. So if you post something, you'll see it. I'm getting cat bombed right now, so I think it's time for us to get into this next part of the show we like to call.
It came from.
That's right. It came from. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics that the community is talking about. If you find any of these answers useful, give us a like wherever you're watching or listening to help other people find this content. It'd be really useful. So let's get into this first one here. This is, I landed my first UX UI job. Need some advice. This is by Kaharm on the user experience subreddit. They write, so I landed my first UX job. The first workday is looming. I'm still kind of nervous and definitely dealing with imposter syndrome. So I'm here to ask for your help. What steps can I take to overcome imposter syndrome and gain knowledge and experience beyond learning from my team and asking questions? Should I focus on reading books or mastering tools? Any other general advice for a newbie? Barry, what are your thoughts on this?
Firstly, chill. Just take a breath. It's fine. At the end of the day, they hired you. So they must have at least been convinced in your capability and what they see in you. So it's them that take the risk in this, not you. So first, take a breath. But I think first days on at work on any time, they're always the same. Because every time I take on a new project or a contract, I'm absolutely there with you. I get imposter syndrome all the time. So, but I guess I use it positively, or I I vaguely try and use it positively when I get over it. So I try and think about, right, what is it about this role that or this project or whatever it is I'm going to, why is it making me feel like an imposter? And it can be one of a few different things. It's either it's a new domain. So I've done that when I've taken what I've done and I'm gone into a new domain that I haven't known, but I'm trying to bring my expertise into it. And I've done that quite a few times now. Is it a new client? Is it so? If a new for me, is it new client? Is it somebody I'm trying to engage with and trying to impress them to hopefully maybe get some more work out of them in the future? Or is it just a new area? Am I in the same domain, but am I learning new skills? And therefore, I'm a bit nervous about doing. Once you've identified why it is you feel like an imposter, so what's your nervousness around it, then that makes that's my target in the first few days. To try and focus on learning, and I try and use the first week to be effectively the sponge in that area and pull all that information back. But fundamentally, again, I'd circle right back to they hired you. They see they believe that you've got the skills, and it's as much in their court, in their domain, and in their desire to make sure that you coming on board is a success as much as you need it to be. So you're not on your own, and breathe, take the time. Nick, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you can really do here is to really take on advantage of that onboarding period, right? I think this is a really good time, especially if it's a new domain, new industry. People are going to assume that you don't know much about the product, about whatever it is that you're working on. So take advantage of that time. Really get to know the folks that you're going to be working with. Sit down, ask them questions like, who do I go to for this, that, the other thing? Who's the best about this thing? Um, Ask a lot of questions about what the thing is that you're working on, how things are done internally. The more knowledge that you have about those things, the more confident that you'll feel in your role. So that'll help you with imposter syndrome. When it comes to imposter syndrome, try not, I know this is easier said than done, try not to let it get to you or hold you back. everyone starts somewhere. So I know this is kind of a first job type of situation, and that certainly felt. It doesn't necessarily go away. I still feel it, like a lot of times. So it doesn't go away, especially for certain personalities. Um, so just remember that and try to approach it from some of the same perspectives that Barry was mentioning, right? Focus on looking at the tools and mastering those you'll be using in your role, rather than sort of overwhelming yourself with a lot of information about what you're doing. You want to learn just enough, but not so much that you feel overwhelmed by the complexity of it, right? And that can be a very fine balance, and a tightrope that you need to walk. And really, this is a big one too. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback on your work, and really listen to what people are saying, because it might be good feedback, especially if you're just starting a role. I'm going to mention it later, but develop thick skin early. So that's kind of what I have there. This next one here is starting over in human factors. This is by Caleb Colorado on the human factors subreddit. They write, if you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently in your pursuit of a human factors career? Barry.
Wow, define the beginning. So I guess for me, because I didn't, when I first started out on my initial career, I'd never heard of human factors, didn't know what it was. So it'd be pointless to try and say to have done a human factors degree right from the off, because it just didn't exist. I wouldn't have known what it was. But I would like to have taken academia more seriously, because at that point in my life, I was very much going through a process to get somewhere. Everything was pretty much on train tracks, and the academic elements were just hurdles I had to jump through, rather than something to enjoy, something to engage with, and that goes all the way up to my degree. It was something just a portion of time I had to get through. Um, I guess I would have liked to have different experiences for my A-level years as well, because that wasn't the most pleasant experience ever. But I came through the other side of it, and that's kind of the point. I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and certainly wouldn't be going into what this year is going to be doing for me without them experiences that I've had. That they've all contributed, the positive and negative experiences have all contributed to my level of expertise of whatever that is. Being able to run my own company, being able to know the people I know, to be able to talk on a platform like this. And if I'd taken different routes, particularly through the harder bits, through my early career, it wouldn't have popped me out to where I am now. So there's lots of things I would have, in hindsight, to make my life easier, I would like to have changed, but they would have all put me on a different journey, and I probably wouldn't have ended up enjoying what I'm doing now. So I wouldn't change a thing. Nick, what about you?
Great advice. Don't change a thing. Look, here's the thing: is that similar to you, Barry? A human factors career kind of found me, which is the case for a lot of people. And in that respect, it is kind of hard to think about this question from trying to answer about how to plan for this type of career that finds you in a lot of cases. If you're trying to pursue it, or I guess even beyond that, I think the one thing that I would mention to a younger self is embrace flexibility. Be ready to change at a moment's notice. Don't stick to anything. Don't feel too passionate about anything, because things can change. Embrace feedback from others. Like I mentioned earlier, develop a thick skin early. It's People are going to say things, and you'll hear things that make you feel a certain way, but you need to be able to take that feedback, evaluate it critically, and don't take it personally. We mentioned on the show before, everyone has a certain way of communicating, and if you're in a room with somebody who's telling you what their thoughts are, the chances are your goals and that person's goals are going to be very similar. You're trying to make whatever it is that you're doing better. And so they're not giving you feedback to make you feel bad. Hopefully, they're not doing it to be a jerk, but they are trying to make whatever it is that you're working on better. So be able to have that thick skin early. um, And I think the last piece here, I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the main story, but seek a mentorship and guidance from people who have done this, and are currently in the human factors field, right? Like, I can't tell you how valuable it was to have a mentor, and it was set up in the sense of a like workplace mentor, but even having that relationship was a good one for me because I learned a lot. I learned various new ways of approaching problems that I hadn't thought about before. And if you're looking for that advice, that's where you're going to want to go. That's what I have to say about that one. All right, let's get into this next one here. UX Researcher Newbie by Intelligent Coat 4002, a user experience research subreddit. They write, I'm trying to navigate my way in the industry, but stuck on trying to figure out the next steps to take. Curious on how I'm curious to know if my portfolio to be a UX researcher has to contain UI designs or mainly just my findings. Barry.
So I'm going to wimp out on this one ever so slightly because I'm not in that exact domain and therefore never had to produce a portfolio as such. However, I would query a couple of things around getting involved in this domain. Why focus, if you're trying to navigate in and around the industry, why focus on just being a researcher? Because there are a number of roles out there involved with the UX lifecycle that I think are nuancedly different, but actually come from the same basis. We've talked about it on the show before, whereas there's a fashionable element around some of the roles at the moment, and perhaps some of this is that. However, for me, if you're presenting a portfolio to me, I think there is value in showing a design element as well as findings, because it shows that you've got more arrows to your bow, or more, things like that. So there is absolutely no harm in showing a breadth of skills, not just focus on that individual element. There might be a perfectly good reason why you want to be a UX researcher, and which is why I raised the question. And clearly, if that's the dream ticket, focus on that. But don't be afraid of showing them broader skills. Nick, what do you think?
I think if you're going for that research role, let's look at it from that perspective.
Mhm.
Focus on showcasing your findings in your portfolio and your approach. Make sure that you're sort of summarizing what methodologies that you use, the results that you were getting. The return on investment is another really good marker of how to approach that. I think including designs is okay. Just communicate whether or not you had direct impact on the final design, whether it was you providing recommendations to a designer that then interpreted those recommendations and made the design, or did you do a back of the napkin sketch and hand it to the designer and say, hey, look, this is how it should be based on these recommendations. They took that and made it pretty. Like, indicate to what degree you were involved with that process. I think that's okay, but I wouldn't like put a final design on there that you've researched and maybe you weren't the one doing the mock-ups or development of it and claiming that as your own. That is not what I'm looking for in a portfolio. I'm looking for methodologies and results. And as long as we're talking about research portfolios, I don't even have one. So
yeah. There's another element I would just throw in there as a thing as well, is I guess there is almost a country stroke cultural issue here as well, that I guess my view is always coming from that UK perspective, because that's where I'm at, and there is way fewer practitioners in the field, way fewer, though most of us have to be multidisciplinary one way or another, to the point that we don't necessarily recognize. We know that the different roles exist, but actually we blend one into the other, almost seamlessly, because that's just the way we are, because there's so few of us. Whereas I'm very cognizant now, especially because of these type of conversations, and other conversations that we've had, that actually some of these roles, because there are more practitioners in the field, particularly in the US, but also elsewhere, that there is much stronger divides between the roles to a certain extent, or that they are much better defined, I think, than what they are here in the UK as well, which I find really interesting, and really useful.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, as long as you are highlighting sort of the importance of human factors, user experience, ergonomics, whatever, in your research and how you've applied those principles in your work and your methodology and your results and your outcomes, all that stuff, I think that'll kind of cover it from a portfolio perspective. But again, I don't even have one, so there you go. All right, this is just one more thing. This is the part of the show where we just talk about one more thing. Barry, what is your one more thing this week?
Well, I mentioned it before that Amanda, my wife, she's doing her human factors masters at the moment because after being in business now for 11 years together, she's decided, running a human factors consultancy, that she'd better learn what it's about. But what is really nice for me, having not done that sort of stuff because I'm practical based, it's really good fun about talking about what she's learning, which is fab. Now we went away for the weekend last weekend, and because it's our 20-year wedding anniversary, and been together.
Congratulations.
Thank you. In the icons, we there was no jokes either about it would be the end of the 20-year jail sentence either for life, but I digress. So we went away for a weekend, just the two of us, and on one of the nights there, if you'd sidled up to our table, just the two of us, looking romantically into each other's eyes, you'd have realized that actually we weren't discussing just the longevity of our relationship or the how much we love each other or anything like that. It was actually the affordances of the teapot at the breakfast table, and as well as the nature of the instructions for guidance on climate controls in the bedroom, because she'd been doing about affordances and how the design of things are there to basically be used by us or not. And the teapot that we had at the breakfast table, you couldn't fit either two or three fingers in, and to use it properly, you had to put another finger on the top of it to stop the whole lid falling off. And so that was the depth of our romantic discussion of the dinner table. I mean, who says romance is dead?
And as an added benefit for our patrons, Barry actually recorded that, and we're going to throw it up as their bonus content. It's a surprise to Amanda for sure. No,
I think the 20-year might be an endpoint if I did
that. No, we don't actually have a recording of that conversation. I think that's funny. I think that's actually, in some ways, that is more intimate and more romantic in a lot of ways, because you're both bonding over a common interest, and it's amazing to see that 20 years on, right?
It's also really cool the fact that she's doing all this stuff and I can have a meaningful discussion with her, and that reinforces the fact that I vaguely know what I'm talking about. Perspective. So, Nick, what about you? What's your one more thing?
So I have to laugh because last week, I've mentioned it a couple times, I was out because I was getting my wisdom teeth removed, and I have a lot of anxiety around dental operations procedures. And this was just like pulling teeth. It was pulling teeth. My teeth were erupted, so it wasn't like too difficult, and honestly, probably would have been fine with some local anesthetic. But like, I wanted to be out for this thing, right? So I did some like Googling and searching, and because of the way that insurance works here in the States, like anesthesia wasn't covered, so I couldn't be out for it while they just removed my teeth. But they did provide the option for nitrous or laughing gas, and I sat there. So the experience is just really bizarre. I was sitting there in the dentist chair. They were, they leaned me back. They put the thing over my nose. They said, "Are you feeling it yet?" No. Crank it up a little bit. Are you feeling it yet? No. No. Okay. Your hand should start to feel funny. Your legs maybe a little tingly. Okay. Not feeling it yet. Not feeling it yet. I cranked it up, and then I said, "Still not feeling it." And as I said that, I start to feel it, and then they cranked it up even more, and then I really felt it. I was like, and I was sitting there going, feeling warm and fuzzy. It kind of felt like a buzz, and I was like, "Oh, this is funny because they call it laughing gas, and it's making me giggle." So I'm just sitting there like having a good time, and it's funny. I mentioned this in the pre-show, but literally getting my tooth pulled was quick and painless, and having that experience. Technically, the laughing gas wasn't covered by my insurance, but it was like $80. They had a discount, so it was $80, and I felt like that was worth every penny for me to have that level of anxiety just reduced. And it's like, if you can do that for if you can do that for everything regarding my teeth and dentistry, like, can we do that? That would be amazing. I'd pay that every time. It's just it made me really reflect on patient care
Mhm.
as a whole. And speaking of patient care, we will have some coverage of the healthcare symposium coming up next month. But I think that is a really important piece that in my day to day, I don't necessarily consider. And it's just important to know that it is considered and that people are thinking about it. And thank you to you people who are doing that, because it really made my experience a whole lot better.
I still can't get over the fact, and this is another example of how grateful I need to be about socialized healthcare. The fact that you have to choose between the type of anesthetic based on what your insurance provider would cover you, I just find completely mind blowing.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I didn't have to choose. It was a matter of research and effort to put
yeah,
into it.
yes.
So,
Uh,
yeah. But still, yes, you should be very thankful. All right, well, that's going to be it for today, everyone. If you like this episode, enjoy some of the discussion about taking care of our elders, I'll encourage you to go listen to episode 251, Grandma Relax. It's just a robot, where we talk about putting assistance into grandma's home. Comment wherever you're listening about what you think of the story this week. Really interested in your takes. If you want to join us on our Discord community, love to hear some of your discussion there. For more, visit our official website and stay up to date with all of the latest Human Factors news by signing up for our newsletter. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple ways you can do that. One, wherever you're at, watching, listening, you can leave us a 5-star review. That is free for you to do and really helps us out. Tell your friends about us. That is also free for you to do and really helps us out. Or if you have the financial means to, you want to give us a buck, like I said, a buck gets you in the door for our Patreon stuff. So you can always consider supporting us on Patreon. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Be sure to tune in tomorrow if you're listening tonight or today. Go check out the HFES Town Hall. That's happening. I want to thank Mr. Barry Kirby for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about spicy takes on ageism?
You can find me across social media at Baz_K, or if you want to listen to some interesting interviews with interesting human factorsy people, then find me at 1202 the Human Factors Podcast, which is at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Rome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Rome. Thanks again for tuning into Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
It
depends.
depends.